Losing weight is no easy task, and when you're talking about 100, 150 pounds, you may be a little bit daunted. So I've got an inspiration for you. Meet Dave Mellish, who's lost 160 pounds. Dave, what was your inspiration to make this change?
My inspiration was to live longer, to live happier, to live healthier. I was an athlete in high school and college, and training was at that point mandatory so I could excel well on the field. When it no longer became required, I took a little bit of time off, said, you know, I'm just going to take a month off. Month became 6 months, 6 months became 10 years, 10 years became about 150 pounds. Here I find myself at 375 pounds and realize that, you know, my life may be half over at this point at 34 years old with type 2 diabetes. I decided it was time to make my change.
375 pounds. When you're talking this amount of weight, it just seems like it's never going to come off. So what were some of the things that you did, food and exercise-wise?
Well, I think the biggest key for me was understanding that you're not going to lose 150 pounds in 3 weeks. You're not going to lose, 80 pounds in 3 months. I set 3 small goals and said I'm just going to attain them one at a time.
And what were some of the things that you changed in your diet food-wise, specifically?
Well, I certainly loaded up on fruits and vegetables. I always wanted to think that it's not what you can't eat, it's what you can eat. So instead of how most people would keep a food journal, which seems so tedious to me, like having to write down every single thing that I eat, I decided to make a food checklist and say, look at all these great foods I get to eat all day long, and would check things off rather than feeling like, oh, I just ate an M&M, I gotta write it down.
And how about your exercise program? What did that consist of?
Just like everything else, slow and steady, knowing that you can't, you're not gonna run a marathon when you're 375 pounds, but you might run a marathon, a year later.
And you also told me that this inspiration came from the thought of having a family.
Absolutely. When you're that obese at that time, in this world that we live in, your days on this earth could be numbered. And the thought of death and leaving your wife and family before your time, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good motivator right there for me.
Well, Dave, you're such an inspiration. 160 pounds, you now have a little girl, you've run a couple of marathons, and you're definitely helping people on their way to feeling better and feeling great. It's an inspiration that you can do as well. Losing weight doesn't have to be a big task. Just take it one day at a time, look for the positive things, and remember you've got to eat and move to feel great.